Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld, and this is episode 9 of Hockey on the Spot, continuing with our 30 teams in 30 days for the entire month of August. And today we are going to close out the Pacific Division with the Vancouver Canucks. For the Vancouver Canucks, very interesting year last year, winning yet another Northwest Division title. Their fifth straight, and sixth in the last 7 years, seventh in the last 9 years. And for a team that continues to win divisions and make the playoffs, they continue to suffer early playoff exits. They won the President's Trophy 2 years in a row, 2010, 2011, when they went all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals and lost in 7 to the Boston Bruins, and then 2011, 2012, when they suffered a very disappointing first-round exit at the hand of the eventual Stanley Cup championship-winning Los Angeles Kings. That was in 5 games. Ever since taking a 2-0 lead in the Stanley Cup Final Series against the Boston Bruins, they are 2-12 in their last 14 playoff games, which is absolutely disgraceful by any team standards. So as much as they continue to make the playoffs, they continue to lose. That also includes a sweep last season by the hands of the San Jose Sharks after winning the Northwest Division. So for as far as playoffs go, things have been rather disappointing for the Vancouver Canucks over the past couple of years. So much so that they decided it was finally time to blame their 7-year head coach, Alain Vigneault, who they finally fired after so many years with him. And general manager Mike Gillis thought that it was time for a head coach change. And they did that with former New York Rangers head coach John Tortorella, which is very funny because Alain Vigneault would go to the New York Rangers as their new head coach in Tortorella's place. So in a sense, the New York Rangers and Vancouver Canucks pretty much traded coaches. John Tortorella is now the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, which left a lot of questions. One question that I personally would have is, are the Sedin twins going to thrive well in Tortorella's system? And it's really a good situation to find out, too, because they're both in the final years of their contract, respectively. They will both be unrestricted free agents at the end of the year. And if they don't thrive well in Tortorella's system, then they most definitely will not want to return. So that will be the interesting thing to find out. They also have some other players on that roster who I think are better suited for Tortorella's system, like Alexander Burrows, Ryan Kessler. If Ryan Kessler, of course, is healthy. Chris Higgins is familiar with his system. Dale Weiss is somewhat familiar with his system. Those are the only two guys who have played for him, and Ryan Kessler in the 2010 Olympics when Torts was an assistant coach. But this is a guy who has a very bad reputation with the media, and he's not a player-friendly coach like Alain Vigneault was. So not going to be there is going to be some bad blood between teammates and Torts. One guy I probably have big concerns about is their starting goaltender, Roberto Luongo. After a very unmotivated offseason for him, you got to wonder, is Tortorella's unfriendly player system going to get to Luongo's head and cause him to have another bad year? Speaking of Roberto Luongo, for a guy who they were trying to trade over the course of the regular season specifically to either the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Florida Panthers, they could not get him dealt because of his contract. It pretty much looked like Corey Schneider was pretty much going to be their goaltender of the future, so much that they signed him to a 3-year extension. They were trying to trade Luongo, but they could not because of his long contract. And so, in result, when everything was tight with the cap, they had no choice but to pull the plug on Corey Schneider, the goaltender, who they hoped to be their future. They traded him to the New Jersey Devils at the 2013 NHL entry draft in exchange for their 9th overall pick, which Vancouver would use to select forward Bo Horvat of the London Knights, a teammate of Max Domi and a good player, very good two-way player, and a guy who definitely brings some offense to the table. So I think that was a good pick on Vancouver's part. They also had the 24th pick, which they used to select Hunter Shinkaruk, a pretty similar type player to Zach Parise, but we'll get more into that a lot later. But yeah, Corey Schneider leaving Vancouver and John Tortorella coming in, the two biggest things that happened to Vancouver this offseason. Corey Schneider going to the New Jersey Devils, definitely a big surprise for many. If he was going to leave, no one expected the New Jersey Devils. So it definitely was a very, very surprising trade for many. But he would not be the only guy leaving. They'd also lose a couple of defensemen, or they also depart a couple of defensemen in Andrew Alberts and Cam Barker. Both of them are still unrestricted free agents, but neither will be returning. Center Manny Malhotra and left winger Mason Raymond, same deal. Both are still unrestricted free agents. Both will not be returning. Mason Raymond is one of the biggest unrestricted free agents still out there. It looked like he was going to sign with the Calgary Flames, but that ended up being null and void. So now he has to scramble to look for a new home. But now let's talk about some of these guys that left and have signed elsewhere. Other than Corey Schneider going to the New Jersey Devils, center Andrew Ebbett, who played a significant amount of time with them, goes to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Center Maxime Lapierre, who was their fourth-line center and a very valuable one, he goes to the St. Louis Blues. Center Derek Roy would be joining him with the St. Louis Blues as well. He signed a one-year deal there. Derek Roy, very good player, but a loss that was intended. And right winger Steven Pinizzotto, another depth player, he goes to the Florida Panthers. So yes, a lot of guys leaving Vancouver to open up spots for some youngsters. But they did make a couple of signings, none of great significance, but one of those guys coming in, definitely a guy with Stanley Cup experience. But again, of all the departures, no question that Corey Schneider is definitely the biggest one and definitely the most surprising of all. But the guys coming in, again, not too many significant guys. They get Ben Ferrio, who actually was a restricted free agent, originally had his rights traded to the Minnesota Wild from the New York Rangers. They didn't want to sign him, and so Vancouver took their opening. They signed Ben Ferrio. So technically coming from the Minnesota Wild, but last year played for the New York Rangers, a depth player, a hard-working forward for sure. They got Mike Santorelli from the Winnipeg Jets. Santorelli splitting last year between the Winnipeg Jets and the Florida Panthers, played a total of 34 games, 24 with the Panthers, 10 with the Jets. And overall, he did not have a good season. Only 2 goals and 4 points in 34 games. Not good numbers at all for Mike Santorelli, for a guy who was at one point expected to be a goal scorer and showed it a little bit in 10-11 with the Florida Panthers. That was his career year. He has not had another year like that since. Hopefully he can surge up in Vancouver, because I actually really like this guy. So I think he's a good player, a good center. He'll probably play on their fourth line at least to start. He'll take Maxime Lapierre's spot at center. So I think it's a good move for the Vancouver Canucks. They get a solid player. Yannick Weber, they also signed him, defenseman, coming over from the Montreal Canadiens. A guy originally projected to be a big-time offensive defenseman, native of Switzerland, but only played 6 games last year, rather disappointing. he signs with a 1-year deal in Vancouver, where again he'll probably be the 7th guy. Um, and then the other signing of note, and at this point I'd say probably the biggest signing for Vancouver in a year where they didn't sign too many guys, center Brad Richardson, who is coming over from the Los Angeles Kings, a guy who had been fading out of LA. He was their 4th-line center, will probably be the 3rd-line center in Vancouver. A guy who very good defensive forward, but a guy who also plays a grinding type style. But again, with Colin Fraser coming up in LA, he was starting to fade out. Won the Stanley Cup with them in 2012. Had been a valuable part of their team for years up until last year, but his departure from LA was pretty much a given. And for a team like Vancouver that needs depth, that are good with their top 6, but now need depth, that was the big thing to replace. They get that with Brad Richardson, so I think it's a good signing for them. And now the other big question for that was looming for Vancouver is who the backup goaltender was going to be, because now with Corey Schneider gone, Roberto Luongo pretty much regains the number 1 spot. But first, of course, Mike Gillis and John Tortorella and among others have to try to motivate him first to basically apologize for that rough season last year. But he'll basically regain the number 1 job, at least to start the season. And it is expected that goaltender Eddie Lack will come up from the minors and take Corey Schneider's job. And I've never seen this kid play, but from what I've heard, he is a pretty similar type player to Corey Schneider. And good things are expected out of him. And this is another guy, I think, who in the future could push for the starting job in Vancouver. Last year, he was their top prospect. He is no longer on the prospect list because now he will be in the NHL full-time as their backup goaltender, and he's expected to be a really capable one, too. Now, after talking about the forwards, we already know the Sedins will be back. They'll be on the top line. Alexander Burrows, despite a rough year, will probably play with them. Hopefully Ryan Kessler can be healthy, and hopefully he'll be able to play as their 2nd-line center to add that 1-2 punch at center. David Booth will come back healthy. He'll probably replace Mason Raymond on that 2nd line as the left winger. Zach Kassian will probably be on that line. Chris Higgins and Yannick Hansen will both probably be on the 3rd line with Brad Richardson at center. And then on the 4th line, Mike Santorelli will probably be their 4th-line center. But the big question now, who's going to be on his wing? So there are many assumptions that it'll possibly be Dale Weiss and Ben Ferrio. But they also got guys like Tom Sestito and Zach Hamill, a former 1st-round pick who has yet to live up to his expectations. Maybe he finally plays. They had Jordan Schrader last year, who played 31 games, had 9 points. Maybe he'll play. A former top prospect, no longer on the prospect list. But I think Jordan Schrader's very capable, despite being a small guy, very capable of getting back into the lineup and playing a full season. I think he's ready. But again, it's going to be a huge competition. It's a given that Mike Santorelli will be in the lineup as their 4th-line center, but it's just a matter of who will be playing wing on that line with him. Defense, very interesting. Now with Andrew Alberts and Cam Barker gone, also Keith Ballard. Keith Ballard is also gone. He signs with the Minnesota Wild over the offseason. That was another loss of intent that was intended. He was a big disappointment in Vancouver with him gone too. They have a couple of young defensemen who can definitely play. Alexander Edler will definitely be back. Kevin Bieksa will definitely be back. Dan Hamhuis and Jason Garrison, both of them will definitely be back. And Christopher Tanev will definitely be back. But now they have a 6th spot on defense. It'll probably be one of 2 guys. Yannick Weber could possibly get that job, but they also have a youngster in Frank Corrado, a kid who came up out of nowhere, played last year. He's another kid who I think can definitely compete with Yannick Weber for that 6th spot. It is assumed that Corrado will probably get it, but but anything can happen. I think this is a league where anything can happen. So spots opened up on defense with the departures of Ballard, Barker, and Alberts. So and that opens up for Chris Tanev to claim the 5th spot and for these two guys to battle it out for the 6th spot. And then, of course, the situation in goal with Schneider gone, Roberto Luongo reclaims the starting job, and Eddie Lack gets called up to be the backup. So it's going to be a young team in Vancouver this year for sure, and a different team to look at. Again, one face that leaves, like I said, but had been injured for a while and is questionable to see if he'll ever come back. Manny Malhotra, a very valuable guy, great face-off winner. He will definitely be missed. He was a popular face in Vancouver, but has not played in a long time because of injuries, a concussion, and his career may possibly be over. So finally out of his contract, very good thing. Anyway, now let us now take a look at actually, no. The big question for the Vancouver Canucks this year, though, is Ryan Kessler going to be healthy? How is John Tortorella going to do as head coach? And is Roberto Luongo going to be motivated enough to have a stellar year like he used to have? It's going to be interesting to see all these things. I think Tortorella will be fine in Vancouver, except maybe with the media. Ryan Kessler, this is a great player when healthy. They need him badly. So I hope Kessler does come back, because another place where he will be needed will be at the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia. They'll definitely hope he'll be healthy for that. And then, of course, you have Roberto Luongo. Hopefully he'll be motivated enough to be the starter, and hopefully for his sake, Eddie Lack won't take his spot. All right, now let's take a look at Vancouver's top 10 prospect pool. Very interesting prospect pool. Nicholas Jensen is their number 1 prospect, with Bo Horvat at number 2, no question. They got Brendan Gaunce in there. Frank Corrado, who is going to possibly play this year, he's their number 4 guy. Hunter Shinkaruk is in there. Joachim Eriksson, a former draft pick of the Philadelphia Flyers. So they have a lot of guys. They definitely have a lot of good prospects. And actually, this is a very deep prospect pool. Way deeper than the Edmonton Oilers, San Jose Sharks, or Los Angeles Kings. But they're probably in the middle, just barely not as deep as the Calgary Flames, and nowhere near as deep as the Phoenix Coyotes or the Anaheim Ducks. They're basically in the middle. So they're in the middle of the Pacific Division, not as deep as the Flames, Ducks, or Coyotes, but way deeper than the Kings, Sharks, or Edmonton Oilers. But the one prospect on this list that caught my eye more than anybody was their number 6 prospect, left winger Hunter Shinkaruk. He was the second first-round pick the Vancouver Canucks had at number 24 overall. Superstar for the Medicine Hat Tigers of the Western Hockey League. Small player for sure, but a 86-point scorer, 37-goal scorer, very similar type player to a guy like Zach Parise. Reminds me very much of Zach Parise after seeing him play. And I think in the future, within the next couple of years, when he comes up, he will be the Vancouver Canucks version of Zach Parise, and he's going to be a prospect that they're going to love in the future. Now, last but not least, the player on this team that I think needs to play well for the Vancouver Canucks to be a playoff team and be healthy is, without question, center Ryan Kessler. If they're going to make the playoffs, not only does he need to be healthy, but he needs to get back to being that 41-goal scorer that they know he could be. Ryan Kessler needs to be healthy and in the lineup, and he needs to be that player again. Overall, are the Vancouver Canucks a playoff team? I'm pretty convinced that they are. They have the top 6 forwards and the top 4 on defense to be a playoff team, and I like their depth now with Brad Richardson on board. Their youngsters are good. I think they're going to be just fine. Now, will they win the division? I don't know about that. That's very questionable, but they will be a playoff team. All right, guys, that closes out the Pacific Division, our Pacific Division tour. That'll do it for episode 9 of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld, and for our next episode, we start our Central Division tour with the Chicago Blackhawks. Thank you, and have a nice day.